Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I am going to be talking about, in my opinion, the most complex zodiac sign. And yes, this does apply and pertain to the sun, moon, and ascendant. Anyway, people, first off, I would say it's certainly not Aries. Aries is very direct, straightforward, and purposeful. They're very single-minded. I think they're pretty easy to understand and comprehend. Aries could be very outspoken, direct, and forthright. It's pretty much what you see is what you get. There's not much pretense with this sign. This sign is just very open about things. And I mean, they have a forgive and forget philosophy. We know that the Aries, of course, can be provoked easily, but they're not vindictive or vengeful or hold a grudge. They're very much, they get things out in the open, they air their grievances, so to speak, and then they forget about it afterwards. So it's certainly not Aries. Now, next sign, I think of all the signs, I think it would be safe to say it's not Taurus. I mean, Taurus has a very basic fundamental nature. I mean, I should know something about this, being that I have a Taurus ascendant. And Taurus is very consistent and constant in their habit patterns, very predictable. Taurus is basically about generating income, having a good place to live. They are about sensuality, and they really enjoy just having the basic necessities in life. Often they're ones that are not generally going to deviate from their routine or their basic fundamental character. Their personality is very consistent. They can have a very even temperament, and they're not ones to really vacillate or change much in their nature. I mean, Taurus may actually even be seen as boring and monotonous by some, where they just like to just feel that maybe that they're very just focused and constant in who they are in their habit patterns. So I would say it's certainly not Taurus. Now, anyway, well, the next zodiac sign, Gemini, can certainly be a good candidate. I mean, Gemini can be very contradictory. They can vacillate, and they can be very fickle and changeable. A lot of their changeability, I believe, is attributed to the way they might change their mind on something they're thinking on matters and people. And they could be very unpredictable and hard to gauge. They could say something one minute and do something exactly opposite and contrary to what they said the next. They are very versatile. They're very multifaceted. They could have many sides, manifold sides to their nature, actually. But when I look at the zodiac sign Gemini, I just think it's going to fall a little bit short of the sign that I'm going to choose at the end of the video. So anyway, well, as far as the zodiac sign Cancer goes, I think they're very basic. I would not say Cancer is the most complex zodiac sign. They could be very introverted, introspective. They could have a strong focus on their home and family and keeping the roof over their head, just about sustaining themselves and getting themselves their food and having their protection for their home and for their family. Cancer often accentuates and emphasizes safety and security. Despite being rather moody and temperamental, Cancer can actually be a strong creature of habit, and they could have strong tenacity as far as what they truly desire. They're not ones that are very complicated or hard to figure. I don't believe they are fairly readily understood, I would say. I think most people that meet Cancer, Sun, Moon, Ascendant people really do get a pretty good grasp of what they are about. But so I don't really think this is I definitely don't think it's the most complex zodiac sign. Anyway, well, the next sign, I don't think it is Leo either. I mean, Leo can, of course, be very flamboyant. They're extroverted and gregarious. I think most people understand the basic nature of Leos, the fact that they often like to be the center of attention. They're the ones that want to command that and be lauded and praised for what they do. They like to stand out. And I think their character is it's fairly basic. It's to me where there's nothing that complex or complicated about the zodiac sign Leo. They often like to be on top as far as being the dominant person. They often are ones that have a very strong personality and often like to dominate, and they express a lot of times who's boss, so to speak, in a very loud and vociferous manner, and let people know about it. And they're really not ones that are hard to gauge. I would say it's definitely not Leo. Now, next sign, I would say Virgo is not the most complex zodiac sign either. I mean, Virgo, of course, is about their analysis. They're often very punctilious and meticulous with details. I think their nature is fairly basic. They are very industrious and hardworking, and they're really, the thing about them though is that they do, of course, love to analyze and criticize. I think the thing about them though is really they're very strongly connected with their work ethic, and they are ones that I think people can actually understand fairly, I would say fairly easily. They are ones that are really about service, about helping, about being productive, about really the work ethic. And they are often ones that will help others, but not necessarily in an officious or unwanted manner. So there's really nothing to really, as far as anything complicated or complex about the sign, I would say no. Anyway, next sign I want to talk about is Libra. Now, I don't see Libra as being the most complex zodiac sign. Libra is often about balance, justice, and harmony. They can often admire modesty and refinement. They are about their charm, their tact, and diplomacy. They really, their basic theme, I mean, they're really, they are strongly about peace and having tranquility and reconciliation. I mean, the only thing that it might be, there's really, I don't even see this as being complex with Libra, but they could, I mean, what's interesting about them being, given the fact that they are so much about reconciliation and compromise and a very negative manifestation, they could also be ones that can cause the disruptions in relationships and separation. So they could kind of go both ways with Libra. They could either be the ones that can be the mediators and the ones that can reconcile situations, or they could be the ones that could actually disrupt the relationships and others' relationships and cause discord with them. But to me, this is certainly not a sign that I would put as the most complex zodiac sign. So anyway, well, the next sign, actually, I'm going to talk about it, I'm sure a lot of people think is the most complex zodiac sign. I don't. I think it could be very close to the one I choose at the end of the video. However, Scorpio, the zodiac sign Scorpio, can be a prime candidate. Now, some may see them as the most complex zodiac sign. They can seem very complicated to others because they are often very mysterious. They often have a very placid front that could suppress rather turbulent emotions, similar to what I believe the planet Pluto, or at least I theorize, I do think strongly that there are some waters beneath that icy surface, and I believe scientists are getting closer to perhaps actually making that an official discovery, but I don't think that is official as of yet. And the thing about them, though, is that what makes them somewhat complicated is that they are very, I mean, for one thing, they are ones that can be averse and abstain from superficial connections, but yet they are very hard to know deeply. I think it's just the fact that people have difficulty figuring Scorpio out because they're so secretive and mysterious. But I don't think they're really, I mean, they are not ones, I don't see them as being the most complicated, and I'm going to explain why when I choose the sign at the end of the video. I think the complexity with Scorpio is really mainly just tied into their mysterious nature, and there's more to Scorpio than meets the eye, and they just don't really show all their cards to many people, so to speak. So anyway, and I want to also say that they could also be very powerful. They could be very formidable and can even look imposing and very intimidating. Most mysterious, but not. I don't see them as the most complex. Anyway, next sign I'm going to talk about, well, Sagittarius. I mean, I think most people can really gauge what Sagittarius is about. They're very much like Aries. It's kind of like what you see is what you're getting. Basically, they're ones, I mean, they're not like as abrasive as Aries can be, but they're ones that, of course, can speak the veritable truth, or at least their veritable truth, so to speak, but have a very often jocular and jovial and fun-loving demeanor. They often like to joke around. They could be very good at parties because of this. I think about the most intriguing thing about Sagittarius is that even though they are the sign of expansion, they could often be reluctant to expand, though they're not their relationships per se, but the individuals in their relationships. They want, as far as expanding the depth of those individual relationships. So they don't mind expanding their horizons, expanding their relationships in the sense of the amount of people they have in their life. But as far as each individual connection goes, they are not ones to necessarily go very deep with them, because they are often the meanders and adventures of the zodiac, and they are ones that are not really, they often don't stick around in a place long enough to actually make a real close connection with somebody. But there's really nothing that deep about Sagittarius. They might be about, it could be about often abstract thinking, but they're not ones that are where really there's anything that complex or complicated about their nature. Anyway, next sign up. Well, as far as Capricorn goes, I think Capricorn is one of the probably the least complex zodiac signs, because Capricorn can often be very conventional, orthodox, and very consistent in their manner. They're often very predictable. They're about strong planning and premeditation, and can be very single-minded. They often can be, I see them as being on average the best planners of the zodiac. They are certainly, I'd say, the taskmasters. And they might have a certain complexity in them. I mean, they have the thing about Capricorn is they could often appear older than they are when they're younger, but when they're older, they may actually age gracefully. And because, I mean, this is the sign of longevity. And also, despite appearing somewhat cold and callous, at least, well, the men anyway, the men, excuse me, may take a fatherly image to others, and because of that, that's actually a sign of compassion right there. So Capricorn actually has some, they just don't really readily show it to others. So that's really about the most complex thing I would say about Capricorn, but I don't see them as being the most complex zodiac sign. Anyway, now the next sign I want to talk about is Aquarius. Now Aquarius could certainly be a prime candidate for being the most complex zodiac sign, because they could be very paradoxical. This is a sign that could be very progressive and open-minded, but exceptionally fixed and intransigent regarding their views. And they can make friends readily, but yet can be detached. Their spending habits may be paradoxical as well. They could be rather extravagant with large items, and maybe perhaps more frugal with smaller ones. And the thing about them too is that they can express like a universal love and friendship to others. I see Aquarius as really having that universal friend syndrome, is how I see them. But they are ones that have a hard time concentrating that energy into one person, because they could be very detached. There are ones that can make their friends easily, but there are ones that their relationships can often be very they're not generally very deep. Most of them, it's more just a lot of their friends, or what they see as friends, might be more like acquaintances to them, and they're not really often deep friendships. So anyway, well, the sign that I'm going to talk about, as far as what I think is the most complex zodiac sign, is the zodiac sign Pisces. Now, a lot of people may not agree with it. Again, I think there may be a very strong consensus that might actually think that Scorpio is the most complex zodiac sign, but I'm going to talk about why I think it is Pisces. Pisces, I think, well, the main reason I see them as the most complex zodiac sign is simply because, at least in astrological theory, which some may concur and others not, I agree, I guess you could say subscribe to this theory as well, that they're the amalgamation of the previous 11 zodiac signs. It's like they're comprised of like 11 zodiac signs. They have so many different proponents in their nature, and it's almost like you don't know necessarily who you're getting one day to the next. Pisces can also be very strongly influenced by varied company, and they could pick up those traits, those characteristics and even that behavior from others. Now, I know the zodiac sign Cancer is similar that way. Cancer being water sign, they could be rather impressionable, but with Cancer, it's more about picking up the moods of others. I think Pisces, it's more about replicating really the behavior with those people in general and just copying even actions. They are ones also too that could be very sensitive to extraneous and outside influences. And if Pisces, and if they're born in that third decadent, or decadent slash, you could say decan, the Scorpio one, and that could give them a little bit more of a mysterious element to them as well. Now, the thing about Pisces as well, what I think another reason, what really makes them really the thing about Pisces, what makes them also the most complex zodiac sign, I think a lot of it is because there's a lot of like paradoxes and oddities with this sign. I mean, they are ones, for example, Pisces can be the master at deception and duplicity, but they are also ones that could be devastated by deception and duplicity from others and betrayal, and they often can't detect it when somebody is pulling the wool over their eyes, so to speak. Pisces also in the northern hemisphere anyway, they can have often Aries will be intercepted in that first house, so that really makes them even more enigmatic. It makes them even more complex. And the thing about them too is that even despite appearing somewhat confused and nebulous, sometimes they still have that lucid view of that road ahead. And the thing about them as well, if you look at this Pisces as well, they are just almost like so multifaceted. They are so nondescript that they could simply defy complete classification. They are really ones that also too, what makes them complicated as well, complex, is that the way they appear, it can often be misconstrued by others. Now, for example, while Pisces may come across to some people as being rather, in some cases, standoffish, they might seem really just very distant and maybe even oblivious to others, but what it is they're often just kind of retreating into their own little sanctuary to kind of escape the harsh realities of the world in their own little place of solitude and seclusion. And I think a lot of us, what puts them in that state of trepidation and fear, is that really about others potentially hurting them. So they are ones that they are often very misconstrued. Pisces can also be very ambiguous. They also, too, what I think about them, what makes them hard to gauge is that even I'd say with them, more so than any of the other zodiac signs on average, could actually look different, more different in a photograph than when as opposed to seeing them in person. Kind of ironic. I mean, Pisces is the sign associated with photography. But yet, if they're photographed, I think they look different in the photograph on average more so than the other zodiac signs. It's almost symbolic of them. They can have a chameleon-like nature, so it's not really shocking or bewildering to see that they could appear more different, and I think in photographs on average, as opposed to seeing them in person than the other zodiac signs. And they are ones too. And again, you're talking about these paradoxes with Pisces. Another thing what I find interesting about them is they're also just something very ironic about this sign. They often, I mean, I see Pisces as being the most mediumistic zodiac sign in terms of being able to perhaps forecast anything pertaining to the future. Well, the thing about it is they may be able to have the propensity to do that for others, but yet they often lack their direction in being able to gauge their own future and dictate their own future, where they're going to wind up eventually. They are, or what they're going to aspire to be, or what's going to hold for that, what's going to hold true for them in their future, because the nature of the nebulous, this connected with this sign. So it's really, for all these reasons, it's just, to me, it is. And also to keep in mind that Pisces, they are, I would say they're probably, given the fact this chameleon-like nature of the sign, the fact that they feed off, I believe, other astrological energies more so than the other zodiac signs on average, I would say they are probably more sensitive to progressions, like say into other signs. As say if somebody has a Pisces sun, moon, or ascendant, having it progress into other signs, they will feed off that energy, I think, more so than any of the other zodiac signs on average, and will be influenced and impacted by that more. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for what I believe is the most complex zodiac sign. Stay tuned next time, where I'm going to be giving you my Scorpio August 2018 horoscope forecast. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.